So we're going to talk a little bit about how to use XML with Ajax calls. And the primary difference between using XML and HTML is that when the server returns the request and it's HTML, it's returning a response text property, which does not need any additional processing to display. When it returns XML, there is additional processing that you have to do in order to display the results. So when it's returning response XML, you do have to store the data in some kind of a variable or object. And so I'm going to go ahead and walk through an example. And let's take a look first at what this example does. So this is very simple. We're just going to click a button and it shows just the recording artists that are in a CD collection. The CD collection is an XML file. So let me show you what that file looks like. Okay, so it's a catalog, and then within catalog, the child element is CD. And then with CD, we have title, artist, country, company, price, and year. And you'll notice that all of the elements have capital letters. Okay, so in our code, because this is case sensitive, if we want to retrieve artist, we have to use all capital letters when we are telling the browser that that is what we're interested in retrieving. So here's our code, and you can see we have a button that gets clicked. And so we basically set up a little event listener. So we've got document get element by ID load, which is our button, storing that in my collection. We're using my collection, and we're adding a event listener to that. We're listening for a click. And if that button is clicked, then we go through an anonymous function, which is basically all of our code. So at the top of the code, we are creating the XML request object, XHTTP, and we haven't set anything to the server yet, so we're going to skip that part. Then we tell it that we want to send the data using GET. The file that we're going to send is the CD catalog, and yes, we want it to be asynchronous, and then we go ahead and send it to the server. So the server is getting this data and it's processing the data. So as it completes each step, it is sending the ready state back and we are checking it. So once it reaches a 4, we check the status to make sure it is 200, which means it was successful, and then we can process the response. So we take the response XML property and we store it. We create a little text string that we blank out, and then we take the XML doc that is storing our response, and we use get elements by tag name, because XML is all about the tags. Okay, so we are retrieving every occurrence of artist. So it's going to give us a node list. Okay, and that node list we are calling X. And then to display all of the artists, we get into this little for loop. So the condition we are checking is to see if our subscript, I, is less than the length of our node list. So X is our node list. It's got all of the recording artists in there. And we're going to basically stay in this loop as long as our subscript is less than the length, which makes sense because if we try to subscript in and we're beyond the bounds of our node list, we're going to be getting garbage. Okay, so we're adding to the text string here. We're subscripting into X. So to get the very first artist in the node list, we have to subscript in with 0. Okay, and what we want is the value that is stored. So if we look at our CD collection, we're asking for the first artist, and we want the value that is being stored. Okay, and so that is what gets added into our text string, and then it puts a break, a line break at the end. Okay, then it comes through the second time. Now our subscript I is a 1. And so it's going to come through here. So this was 0, this is 1. So now it's going to retrieve that text and add it into our text string with the line break on the end. And it's going to continue going through the node list until it reaches the bottom. When it reaches the bottom, it is out of the for loop. And we're going to update our HTML using inner HTML. So the area that's being targeted is right here, and it's going to get updated with that data. And then the next step is simply to hide the button. Okay, the data is already displayed, no reason to show the button anymore. So that is actually a pretty simple example because we're just accessing one element. Now this next example is a little more complicated because we are accessing more than one thing. So let me show you how this one looks. And you can see that we're accessing 3 different things. And instead of putting a line break at the end of each line, we now have everything in a table. So that makes it just a little bit more complicated. So I've got the CSS up here, which you guys are all familiar with. And so this is basically the same processing. Okay, we're still attaching an event listener to that load button. We still create the XML HTTP request object. Okay, we're still opening that CD catalog with get and asynchronous set to true, and we're still sending it off to the server. Okay, once the server is done processing, we are still taking the response and we are storing it in XML doc. Where this is different is instead of having an empty text string, we are actually creating a table. And you will notice that we've got the table tag defined, and we basically have the first row. And this is before we get into our for loop. So we are using TR for the row, TH for each column, which is for the headers. And after we add that into our text string, then we are using get elements by tag name, and we are retrieving all occurrences of artist. We're storing that in a node list named A. And then we are retrieving all occurrences of the tag name title, and we're storing that in a node list named T. And then we are retrieving all occurrences of price, and we're storing that in a node list named P. And then we're getting into our little for loop. Now, it does not really matter if artist, title, and price are all filled in. It does not matter which one you check the length of. So pick one of them that you know is filled in, and then use that. And you'll notice that first thing we do is we add the TR for a new row, and we add the opening tag for our first column. Okay, so after that opening tag for the first column, we are subscripting into the artist, and we're grabbing the value, which is their name. Okay, then we're adding the closing column tag and inserting a new opening column tag. Okay, because in column 2, we are going to be putting the title. So we're subscripting in to our title node list, and we're retrieving the value. And then we put in the closing column. Then we have the opening column for our third column. We're accessing price, and we are grabbing the value that is stored. And then you can see that we end the column and we end the row. Okay, and we go through and we process all of the data this way. Okay, so we come through here, we grab the artist, then we grab the title, then we grab the price, and then we move on to the next one. Grab the artist, grab the title, grab the price. Okay, and we go through the entire list like this. Once we are done, so we've processed all of the artists, then we add the closing table onto our list, and then we update the HTML and we hide the button. So this is similar to the first one. It's just a little bit more involved because now we are retrieving 3 columns and we are displaying them in a table. So this same exact thing can be done using JQuery. So we will take a look at that. So here is the exact same thing with JQuery. And if you're curious, you right-click, you can see the source. So because this is JQuery, we're using a little slightly different command. You'll notice the HTML is the same, the CSS is the same. So where it's different is inside the script. So we've got the document ready function. Remember, nothing ever processes until everything is loaded. And then we have the Ajax call. We're telling it that the type is equal to get. Our data type that we are dealing with is XML, and the URL is our CD catalog.xml. And if the request processing is successful, okay, then we're going to run this anonymous function, and XML is the data that gets passed back from the server. Okay, so we're calling that XML. And then you'll see that we have a text variable that we've put all of the table information in. And then in order to retrieve the data, we are using XML, which is the variable that's got all our data in it, .find, and we're telling it to find CD. So I think this is helpful if we take a look back at that file, just so you can remember the structure. So catalog is our root, and within the root, the child is CD. So if we access every single CD, then we will be able to get to all the data that is stored inside. Okay, so this is just saying find every single CD element and go through each one. Okay, and then we've got another anonymous function. So this anonymous function then is adding in the row and the opening column, and then we're telling it to find the artist and retrieve the text. Okay, that gets added in, and then we add in the closing column and an opening column, and then we're telling it, hey, retrieve the text for the title, and then we add in the closing column, opening column, retrieve the text for price, add in the closing column and the closing row. Okay, and it's going to do this for every single CD in our list. Once it's done, we're adding in the closing table, and this is how we are updating the HTML using JQuery. Okay, text is the variable that is storing the table and all the data, and we are updating at the record info ID location. What are we updating? We are updating HTML. Okay, and then we change the button to invisible. Okay, and it's pretty much done. So the JavaScript version and the jQuery version do the exact same thing. They just do it in a little different way. Okay, and I do have a couple additional examples. So that node file we looked at earlier, here's an example using that. And so far we have looked at loading up HTML, but you can also load a text file. And that's what this one is showing you. So if I hit display answer, okay, that text is coming from a text file. And using text files works the exact same way as HTML. Okay, so there is no difference if you are returning HTML or text. You can see that it's response text that we use to update.